Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Laura Burbank. Viewer discretion is advised. Laura Burbank was born in 1957, and she was living in Tacoma, Washington with her family. I don't really know much about her. This was from back in 1970, and she was only 13 years old, so there really wasn't much of a history. Laura would frequently go to a little animal or a pet store at the B&I shopping center in South Tacoma. She would go there all the time. And there was an adult employee there named David Fisher that apparently Laura befriended. I guess she would come into the store and he would always talk to her when she was looking at animals. And this is a 29-year-old man. So allegedly, Laura goes into the pet store on June 29th, 1970. She has an interaction with David Fisher that people observe. Now, according to others, David Fisher had told Laura, hey, I'm going to be doing some training. I'm going to be training monkeys, but that's not going to be here at the store. It's actually at a different location. Would you like to come and watch that? Laura, being a 13-year-old girl, said, yeah, that would be really cool. I want to see some monkeys. And so he tells her that to meet him the following day, and he would pick her up. So the following day, on June 30th, 1970, Laura would ask her parents, can I go down to the pet store? And they said yes. She didn't tell them about David Fisher. So she leaves her house around 12 p.m. that day, and then her parents never see her again. It would be at approximately 2 p.m. when a neighbor to the Burbank family saw Laura basically sitting on a curb, and he was riding a horse. I guess he would ride his horse around the area. Well, the 13-year-old girl he observed was sitting in a parking lot with no one else around, and he said, hey Laura, how's it going? And she's like, I'm doing good. He goes, what are you up to? And she basically told him, I'm waiting for a friend to go train some monkeys. And, thinking that obviously her parents probably knew this was happening. He was just a neighbor. He didn't really dive too deep into this. He said, okay, well, have fun. About 20 or so minutes later, he rides his horse back the other direction and passes by that same parking lot, but now Laura is gone. So he assumed that whoever was picking her up picked her up. Later that afternoon, when Laura hadn't come back home, her parents obviously became very worried. Laura promised she would be home by a certain time that afternoon, and she never broke promises like that. She would always be back when she said she was going to be back. So at first, her parents go down to the pet store. They walk around and ask people, and they say that basically Laura hadn't actually been in the store that day, which was unusual to the parents because that's what Laura said she was doing. So they begin driving around the entire neighborhood, and they are looking all over for her, and they're having absolutely no luck. So Laura Burbank, the 13-year-old girl, was reported missing to police. Almost immediately, police were informed about David Fisher, that because the police would go to the pet store and they would talk to people there because they found out that Laura was there all the time and figured that's the last place she said she was going to be, so that's the best place to start. And so that's how they found out about her interactions with this 29-year-old guy named David Fisher. So police, and he wasn't at the store that day, so police would go to his house. He had a wife, a 16-year-old wife who was pregnant. So when police ask him, hey, witnesses have stated that you are seen talking to Laura all the time, and he said, well, it's a pet store. I talk to kids all the time there. We have a lot of kids who come in to look at the animals. And after seeing a picture of her, he actually had the nerve to deny he ever even knew her, that he never spoke to her, had no idea who she was, didn't recognize her. David Fisher seemed to not give two single shits about this missing 13-year-old girl. To police, he seemed very flippant, unemotional, uncaring. Something just did not feel right with this guy. But that being said, while he is obviously a suspicious dude and kind of a concern, they didn't have any evidence to say he actually did something to Laura. They had no physical evidence. They don't even know where Laura is. She could have run away for all they know. And that's one theory they had bouncing around, of course, was that 13-year-old girl. Maybe she got upset with her parents and she just bolted. She'll be back soon. But after about 2 weeks, police begin to think, okay, this is obviously not a runaway. This is a missing girl, and we are considering this a foul play scenario. This is an endangered missing child. Meanwhile, her parents and her family are just like sick with grief, and they're sick with unknowing where their daughter is, and they can't sleep, and they're a hot mess, obviously, as any parent would be. And then David Fisher's wife goes into the police station alone without her husband, and she tells them that one night David came home and he was extremely persistent with her about washing a particular pair of jeans he had. When she saw the jeans, they were completely filthy. They were dirty and they were gross, and he demanded her to clean them immediately. She had told police that David Fisher was, she described as, an immaculate dresser, and he never got his clothes dirty, and she had never seen anything he ever wore looked this filthy, not even remotely close ever before. She also tells police that when she was doing laundry roughly 2 weeks or so after Laura's disappearance, that the laundry had a single pair of girls' underwear, and it was not hers, and it was like a smaller size. And this was like very concerning to her, obviously. She didn't really know if it was like maybe just a smaller woman he had interacted with, and maybe he was having an affair or what. She didn't really know for sure, but to her first gut feeling was these are like children's underwear. So Laura's parents, Ken and Dorothy, would look at those underwear when police had them finally, and they said they were Laura's, that they belonged to her. But they still didn't have Laura, and they didn't have any proof that she was dead or anything like that. But that proof would come 3 months later, 3 months after she disappeared. There were some kids playing near the Rainier Olympia Highway in some like wooded area. And this is in Olympia, Washington, approximately 25-30 miles away from where Laura was last seen. These kids found a body, basically partially buried. So they saw some of the body kind of sticking out of the ground, and when they inspected closer, they realized that this was a dead human buried under the ground. And so they went to police immediately. So police arrive and they unearth the body completely, and a couple weeks later, I think it was on September 22nd, they would finally identify that body as that of 13-year-old Laura Burbank. The coroner determined that she had definitely been sexually assaulted, and her cause of death was likely, from what they can tell by her skull, was a severe blow to her head. Once the information about the body being found, where it was found, other witnesses would come forward to state that they saw a truck that had the name of the pet store that David Fisher worked at, the one that Laura Burbank would go to, near that location where the body was found, around the time Laura had initially disappeared. No one thought anything of it, because why would anyone? But that was just further proof that David Fisher was likely responsible for this. Now, the evidence at that point was really circumstantial, but they had enough to issue an arrest warrant for David Fisher. So when they go to arrest him, he's gone. He fled. And then 8 days after that, he would turn himself into police with his lawyer, and he just said to the detectives, "All right, you've got me now." He actually had the balls to ask police, "Can you let me stay free, though, for just a few more days, because the birth of my very first child is happening?" And police were like, "Oh, fuck you. No, you're under arrest for first-degree murder. You're not getting the right to see your child born. Sorry." Now, because police had virtually no physical evidence to directly connect him to this murder, all they had was the circumstantial stuff with regards to the pet store truck being seen near where her body was found. The underwear, I don't think they had any forensic conclusions to state that they were definitely Laura's. They just had the parents' identification of them. They had the fact that David Fisher lied about ever knowing Laura Burbank and said he had never seen her ever before, when tons of people at the pet store said they interacted all the time. He definitely knew who she was. They also looked at the fact that 29-year-old David Fisher was married to a 16-year-old girl and got her pregnant. they looked at that too as kind of like being a predatory type behavior. But again, circumstantial evidence, nothing really physical. So he actually would plead guilty to manslaughter, specifically second-degree manslaughter. And this was in 1971. He was sentenced to just 20 years in prison at the Washington State Prison in Walla Walla. Apparently, for the next 3 years, he was an outstanding prisoner. He was on his best behavior all the time. He was great. And that led to him being assigned to, I guess, the prison's minimum security farm. I guess they had a farm at the prison at the time. Unbelievably, and I don't understand this, this portion of the prison really didn't have any security fences or any high walls. And apparently had no supervision. There were, I guess, no one out there watching these prisoners work on the farm, because David Fisher, after he was assigned to that role, he just simply walked out of the prison. No one saw him, no one stopped him. He just was easily able to just freely walk out, and he escaped. No one even knew he was gone until midnight. This was like almost like 12 or so hours later when they were trying to do a head count. That's the first time they noticed that a prisoner had escaped. And so David at that point had just an insane head start. And police and the prison officials, they searched like crazy for him, but they couldn't find him. And literally for the next 15 years, David Fisher was just out there roaming the world, apparently free as a bird and nobody recognizing him. This is a man that a psychologist who worked with David Fisher, he would say that Fisher is, quote, interested in exploiting young, vulnerable girls. He will look for such targets. He will case them, and he will spend a lot of his time thinking about how he can go about overpowering them, controlling them, and using them for sexual ends. He is very interested in finding someone with whom he can carry out his fantasies, end quote. And so he's also a man that we know murdered a 13-year-old girl who obviously has issues, and now he's just out there. The same psychologist would say during this time when he was out that David did not recognize his own problems. He probably is not aware that he has a lot of internal turmoil. He has likely been like this for a long time. He has an antisocial personality, and he has deviant criminal behavior early in life, and it got worse as he got older, end quote again. During the time that David Fisher was out there in the world, there were several girls in that area who had gone missing / were murdered. 13-year-old Carla Wright. There was also 12-year-old Michaela Welch. 13-year-old Jenny Bastian. I think I've actually covered all of those cases either here or on TikTok, I think. And so because David Fisher was out there, they thought, well, he's probably responsible for all of those. But eventually, with DNA evolving and, just police investigation, they would determine that all 3 of those girls were not killed by David Fisher. They had arrested the people responsible for those crimes. So on March 21st, 1990, the show Unsolved Mysteries would air this case, not because of the murder he committed, but because of the escape, and he was a wanted fugitive. And so they aired it, and then on the night of the broadcast, the Unsolved Mysteries tip line would get a bunch of calls from people in Canada. These people would all say the same thing. They recognized him as a local door-to-door salesman named Michael Raymond Porter. And they were able to basically discreetly find out where he was, and they didn't blast this information out there to give him a chance to run again. So they were able to, on January 4th, 1990, they found out where this person was living. They went to the home and they found him and they arrested him. They were able to confirm it was him based on photographs, based on his tattoos, and so they know they had him. And apparently he had been living a great life. He had a wife who had been married to for the past 11 years. They had 3 kids together. Unbeknownst to her, she was married to a child murderer and had kids with him. It's not her fault. It's just, that's got to be a crazy shock to find out. When police showed up and they arrested him, he actually told them, yeah, I saw the show. I watched it. saw me on there, and so I'm not surprised that you guys are here. So apparently he did know that police may be on the way, and maybe he was tired of running. Apparently, David his new wife said that he always seemed like a caring and loving husband. He was great to the kids. Seemed like a good guy. And they confirmed that she had absolutely no idea about who he actually was. That being said, neighbors who lived near him would describe him as being a very strange guy, and he gave them the creeps in like really subtle ways over the years. Go figure. They believe that David Fisher probably found himself in Canada within a couple of days of him escaping from prison. They learned that, I guess, he first went into Manitoba, and then when he was in, I guess, at something called Vancouver's Skid Row, he had purchased a new identification for just $50. Then he got a job as a salesman, and he just acclimated to this new fake life quickly, I guess. And kind of unbelievably, he would say that he did spend the majority of that time in Canada, the 15 years. But he actually said, I went back to Washington and Tacoma actually a couple of times over the years. That's bold, first of all. And unbelievably, no one recognized him at all when he came back. So I don't know the exact details. They seem to be they're kind of hard to find, but David Fisher was then brought back to the Washington State Prison in Walla Walla. I think he probably got some extra time for the fact that he escaped and was on the run for 15 years. But from what I can tell, at some point in the mid-90s, David Fisher was paroled and he was released back out into the world. And so, to my knowledge, he has been out there ever since. I don't know if he's still alive or not. Hopefully he's not. But it is crazy to me that a man sexually assaulted and murdered a 13-year-old child and escaped prison for 15 years, and he was still allowed to be put back out there. That's insane to me. There should be just a man, you killed a 13-year-old child, boom, prison forever, never being released. You are a danger to everyone. But that's our criminal justice system for you. But that's it. That's it. David Fisher served his time and he was released. And so you have to wonder, did Laura Burbank truly get the justice she deserved? Personally, I don't think so. But that is actually it for this case, True Crime Rooney Dooney Dingleberries. So, hope you found it interesting as usual. But until the next case, True Crimerers, I shall see ya later. Yeah.